The Smurfs 2025 is a 2025 live-action / animation hybrid movie that, getting right to the chase, is very, very bad. Now, to tell you guys the truth, being as honest as I possibly can, when I was younger, I don't remember really getting into the Smurfs all that much. Back in 2011, when my grandma had Nicktoons Network and Boomerang, I remember that my aunt had the TV switched to Boomerang very often, and one of the shows that played on there a lot when I was present was the Smurfs. But that's the thing, it was a thing that I watched when it was on as a pastime. It wasn't really something that left all that big of an impression on me, but at the exact same time, The Smurfs is one of the most important animated shows of all time, because back in the 1970s and 80s, Hanna-Barbera was struggling big time. On top of the fact that they were dealing with overprotective parents who were the reason why many cartoons during that time were over saccharine slop or didn't have any sort of conflict, Hanna-Barbera was putting out so many Scooby-Doo knockoffs and sitcom spin-offs that took a bizarre route that their control over Saturday morning cartoons effectively dropped from 70% down to 20%. And The Smurfs was one of the animated shows that was keeping Hanna-Barbera alive, to the point where if this show didn't exist, Hanna-Barbera would have ceased to exist, and regardless of all the damage that David Zaslav is currently doing to Warner Brothers, Cartoon Network probably wouldn't have existed either. What I'm saying is that The Smurfs is like what Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was for Disney. If it wasn't for that first Disney movie, most of the animated films that we see today would not have come into fruition, whether if it's good or not. The Smurfs was single-handedly responsible for keeping Hanna-Barbera alive and led to Cartoon Network, where we got all the animated shows that we see today. But unfortunately, we're not here to talk about The Smurfs and its influences. We're here to talk about how it's been treated over the years. The original Hanna-Barbera series, from some of the episodes that I watched, is one of those shows that I respect more than I actually like. The series has the same feeling that a lot of Hanna-Barbera cartoons of the past have, outside of Tom and Jerry and the late 80s shows, in that they did noticeably age poorly, though that is understandable because they had a very low budget and had to rely on limited animation, but hindsight is a factor after all, that in the Smurfs themselves were not the most interesting characters ever, though the episodes that focused on the kingdom right by Smurf Village were just bad with very annoying characters. Though I'm speaking about the series from the very few episodes that I watched. I may give this show a Sean's Network Reviews episode someday, but for right now, I'd say that it's a show that I respect more than I like. Well, apparently, the show didn't get that same respect from Hollywood. This has been said on numerous occasions. The live-action Smurfs movies were horrendous, basically being another example of one of those movies based on a cartoon that bring the characters into the real world, where we focus on this random human character that we don't care about and whatever they go through, with the sequel that literally no one was asking for, that also proved to not be much better than the first. Then we got Smurfs The Lost Village, which I actually saw when it came out in theaters back in 2017, and I thought that it was okay. A lot of people had problems with how generic that the movie was, and the movie basically checks off the bingo board on what animated movies are obligated to do, including its use of pop songs, and a fake-out death scene where Smurfette is literally brought back to life because of the tears of the other Smurfs. But the movie at least tries to do justice to the Smurfs, and there's nothing offensively bad about it. Besides, there were so much worse movies that year that you could do than this. But unfortunately, the movie didn't really do well because apparently people went to see The Boss Baby over this movie, and the 2021 Smurf show is one that I hardly hear people ever talk about, but I've never watched it, so I can't say anything about it. Which brings us into the topic of today's review, the 2025 Smurfs movie. And I don't feel like building things up, this movie is bad. Now, before you ask, no, this movie is not as bad as the 2025 Lilo and Stitch remake. Even that movie is what I consider as being far from the worst movie that I reviewed, because with the Smurfs 2025, it may exist to be part of a beloved franchise, but it doesn't destroy or ruin any plot points that a previous movie did, because it is its own self-contained story that exists to stand as its own separate movie, but this movie has a very noticeable set of issues that I really do need to tear into. And let's start off with one of this movie's bigger issues, the animation. While it's not the worst cel-shaded 2D CGI that I've ever seen, I mean, the 2021 Tom and Jerry movie is worse in this regard, the 2025 Smurfs movie has other problems up its sleeve, where there's something that doesn't feel right in ways that are indescribable. While the designs do look nice, as they do continue where Smurfs The Lost Village left off, basically ditching the uncanny valley abominations of the live-action movies, everything goes downhill when introducing the cel-shaded 2D CGI, where the faces look incredibly fake, not even looking like they're a part of the same design, and the animation itself is incredibly choppy. Not to mention either, the characters look very plasticky, and I don't think that I've seen a bigger misuse of its live-action setting than this movie right here. There is literally no reason to have this movie take place in the real world whatsoever, because throughout the entirety of the film, the Smurfs don't interact with any of the live-action human characters. They just choose this real-life setting and do nothing with it. And considering the fact that the main villain of the movie, whom I'll get to in a bit, is basically from the real world, you'd think that they take advantage of this by having him be a live-action human outside of Smurf Village or the other dimensions. But no, they keep him animated, so the other humans are just gonna see a cartoon character walking around and be unfazed by it. If there's something that I could give the live-action movies some credit for, at least the live-action setting had a point to them, and Gargamel being live-action had a point to it. This movie chooses to be animated for the most part, while also disregarding the live-action setting. When, I'm sorry, if Scoob 2020 and the animated Garfield movie from 2024 were more willing to go fully animated than this movie, you have a problem. But my focus is not on the animation. The writing is the most important component. Remember, good writing can save bad animation, but bad writing can never be saved by good animation. Riot and the Last Dragon and Family Dog are good examples of this. Something that the Smurfs 2025 completely skips out on. One of this movie's biggest problems is that it's soullessly manufactured. It wasn't created out of love for the Smurfs, nor was there a drive to really do much with these characters. All this movie exists to do is give singers a chance to sing a song exclusively for this movie. It's exactly why Rihanna is in this movie, and I'm sorry, she was not fit to play the role of Smurfette, because Rihanna's voice is way too deep, and if what we saw with Tip from Home was any indication, voice acting is not her strong suit. And what we know about Smurfette is that she's known to be one of the kindest characters in the Smurfs franchise, with this optimistic look on life. In the original Hanna-Barbera cartoon, she had the romantic sounding voice to her that fit, because she saw the good in everyone, and in The Lost Village, she sounded incredibly optimistic. And while you could argue that it's also them casting a celebrity to play the role, Demi Lovato voices her, but her voice at least fits the character that she's playing. This is literally on the same level as having Chris Pratt play the role of Garfield. You don't hear Smurfette in this movie, all you hear is Rihanna. And because the priorities were all on giving singers an excuse to sing a song, despite the fact that the Smurfs was never intended as a musical in the first place, what do you think that they did for the story? The answer is absolutely nothing. This movie basically takes the Emoji Movie attitude in regards to itself. Yeah, who cares about making an actual movie when we could just advertise our products or find an excuse to make hit songs? So as a result, the film is just the Emoji Movie, but with the Smurfs coat of paint on it. Get this, the movie basically decides to focus on the Smurf that is basically a blank slate, who, get this, is basically sad that he doesn't have one focus on life that the other Smurfs have. Now, how many times have you seen this plot for an animated movie? In fact, this movie's plot literally decides to do the exact same plot as Smurfs The Lost Village, but decides to change its focus on this other Smurf, who we literally do not care about in the slightest, because he never existed in any other Smurfs media before this movie. And why do we even need another Smurf to basically do the odd one out trope, when Smurfette is basically the one that is supposed to fill those shoes? And it makes sense for her to do this, because she was intended to be a Smurf that Gargamel created to basically be evil, until Papa Smurf ended up finding a way to make her good. And her being the only female Smurf made her stand out in a population of Smurfs who were all guys. As much as people got onto Smurfs The Lost Village for being incredibly generic, that movie at least gave Smurfette a character arc. And that movie had a goal that it wanted to accomplish, that being to prove that there are as many Smurfs out there that are female as much as there are male Smurfs, which surprisingly did it in a subtle manner without feeling the need to be all progressive. This movie doesn't even try to give this new protagonist Smurf a character arc. Because just like Nemo from Little Nemo Adventures in Slumberland, all of the solutions and struggles that he goes through in this movie are solved for him without even earning it. And this movie basically does the exact same thing as The Lost Village. Oh, there are other Smurfs out there, 2 of which being my brothers. That is not unique! And apparently, Papa Smurf never at all disclosed this information to them because he wanted to keep them safe. Despite the fact that telling them about these things, you know, your own history, would set them up to be cautious about stuff like this. Instead, after Nothing Smurf ends up performing this magic trick that alerts the antagonist to the location of them and Papa Smurf gets captured, they end up becoming confused because Papa Smurf never communicated this information to them. And Nothing Smurf ends up constantly getting the blame for everything that happens in the movie for absolutely no reason, even when it was not his fault in the first place. And Papa Smurf didn't even tell any of them about this stuff, when, at least in Smurfs The Lost Village, Papa Smurf had a reason to ground them because he legitimately thought that the 4 of them were being crazy and making up excuses for missing curfew after the sun went down, and every motivation and things that caused the conflict in that movie was done out of the character's own volition. And it really says a lot about how dry that this movie is on its own ideas, when in order for them to separate themselves from Smurfs The Lost Village, they had to create a new original character to seem different, but they have Smurfette be the secondary protagonist anyway, so there's literally no point for Nothing Smurf existing at all. And when they had to find an excuse to make a completely new character in order to not look like they stole the plot from another movie, that's a problem. And they also decided to pull the X-character secretly had a twin brother slash sister that they didn't know about until now premise, just to give us a new antagonist. And I use the word new in quotation marks, because the villain in this movie is Razamel, or as I like to call him, Gargamel's crazy brother. And yes, I'm actually being serious when saying this. This movie literally took the same direction as The Little Mermaid 2, where instead of making a new and unique antagonist that has a different personality, as the franchise's most iconic antagonist, this movie decided to have its main villain literally be a clone of him. And why did he even need to be Gargamel's brother in the first place? Couldn't they have had him be like an original character that Gargamel works for? Oh wait, we're talking about the exact same movie that couldn't even be bothered to care about the fact that it takes place in the real world, because all it cares about is the soundtrack. Being original is the last thing that it cares to do. The characters are not even a priority of this movie either. Now, the Smurfs were never really the most interesting characters in the world. The original series was made in the 80s after all, a time where most shows had its main characters not have all that much depth until the 1990s came around. But this movie is the most flat that we've ever seen these characters get by far, for one reason and one reason only. All of them are constantly pushed to the side, to the point where they shouldn't even be in the movie, or even be on this journey to rescue Papa Smurf in general, because the movie's main motto is quantity over quality. Too much is happening all at once to really flesh any of them out, and most of the screen time is focused on Nothing Smurf whining Anakin Skywalker from Star Wars Episode 2 style. But with other movies that have such a big quantity in terms of their cast, like A Bug's Life or Chicken Run, they at least relegated their quantity of characters to being in the background, and then only focused on a few of them at a time. And as bad as the live-action movies were, the Smurfs that came into the real world did things and shared equal screen time, which reminds me, between this movie and the live-action Smurfs movies, would I say that this movie is as bad as those? Not really. I mean, the only thing that keeps it out of that territory is that the movie is soulless at worst, as opposed to being annoying and try-hard, but it's more of a pick-your-poison scenario, because this movie does certain things far worse than those films, while also doing other things that keep it out of that territory. By the way, before the movie starts, we get a SpongeBob SquarePants short called Order Up, that basically has SpongeBob ringing the Order Up bell so many times that it causes Squidward to go insane, up to the point where he finds many ways to beat it to the ground so that it would turn into sand. The short is fine. I mean, it's not nearly as good as, say, Reef Blower or Dream Hoppers, especially since the animation of this short still had that season 6 to 9A feeling to it, where the visuals were still pretty stilted, but but it's still amusing to see the creative ways that Squidward destroys the bell in front of SpongeBob, but I am pretty puzzled that it wasn't showcased until now, because the copyrighted year was 2015, but they probably didn't know where and how they could have showcased this, so they premiered it in front of this movie now that they had the chance, but my point still stands. My recommendation for this movie, don't watch it. While there are far more insulting movies out there that you could be watching, there are also better ones to watch. Go see Elio if it's still in theaters. Go watch K-pop Demon Hunters. And heck, watch the original series, and I'd even say that you'd be better off watching The Lost Village than this. Because whereas those were made out of a genuine want to make a movie or series to actually tell a story, all this movie exists to do is make money off of Rihanna.
Everything